Good morning, everybody. We all had a wonderful session yesterday, day before. I think we have understood. We have to work with full energy and our involvement in the field where we are. Thank you, Ms. Archana, for introducing me and talking a few good words about our journey as an entrepreneur. Mr. Govind, who was my boss and who gave me an entry into foundry way back in 1977, is the person who interviewed me for the whole day. Because I was working in a steel industry, when I wanted to come to an iron foundry, I had to undergo a rigorous interview. Mr. Ram Bhandari, who was my predecessor in Mysore Kirloskar in the same position, who was an inspiration to many. He has taken an entire Belgaum foundry industry to an international level in last 10 decades. Not only that, he is a good human being. When I was working, when I had just joined Mysore Kirloskar, I was hearing that the man who was in my position has started a foundry. Probably we don't know how our thinking will link. I was hanging to meet Mr. Ram. One day I met him, and from that day onwards, probably we are in continuous touch with each other. And he has been always talking about positive. Yesterday he did not like shuttering down. But in my presentation I will also show one or two attempts where I have failed. And Mr. Deepak, who is the leader of the entire UNIDO program, my fellow foundrymen from Shimoga, Belgaum and various parts of the country. Mr. Gumaste was a good friend who has created a record in a foundry industry. Rather, he has turned out a foundry industry to a profit, and today Kirloskar Ferrous is known in the country as well as in the international market. Many of my co-directors are here in this, among the audience. So friends, entrepreneurship, as Suhas has already explained, is not easy. It is not going to be easily accepted by either the family or by the people whom we approach. So before I go into the actual difficulties, I would like to share my background. See, I am from an agricultural family, and my father and mother, they were not educated. Education from high school supported by maternal uncle, who was a senior person in a Vishweshwara Iron and Steel. And my primary education was in my village, and later on I did my high schooling and diploma in metallurgy, which had just come to Karnataka in 1969. After completing, I joined Vishweshwara Iron and Steel, which is one of the best steel producer, with a Buehler collaboration from Austria. There I was working in a technology transfer department. After that, I was parallelly continuing my studies. I did AM/IAM in 1975. But having worked for 8 years, I was still in the same grade, not getting any chance of promotion. After completing AMIM, I started looking for a higher job. Then I got selected in HMT in Tumkur. Just then the plant was coming up. But parallelly, I got a call. I did not apply, but through some contacts, I got a call from Mysore Kirloskar that there is a need for a metallurgist if you can approach. So then, I already shared with you, I had an interview, there was no written interview letter, nothing. I went and just called the HRD person, then immediately they arranged the interview. Though I had not prepared for the written test and all, though the whole day the interview was there. After that, both the places I got selected, then obviously the family members want to be in a government organization, that too in a central government organization. But I was very much inclined to work in a private organization because there I thought I will get a lot of opportunities to come up. Much against the wish of all my elders, I joined Mysore Kirloskar. But the thing is, after I joined, exactly after 1 month, we had a suspension of operation for 3.5 months. I had married in May, so October there was a lockout. During the same period I lost my father. You can imagine the mental status of a person who takes a decision against the members of the family. So later on, everything was good. I went on going up, I never turned back, but I never lost the confidence in myself. See, after this, as I was telling, when I was working in Mysore Kirloskar, I had an opportunity to go abroad. Rather, Mr. Govind had, or as a boss, he had projected my capability to the management, and I had an opportunity to go to Malaysia and establish a foundry, which was a joint venture foundry of Kirloskar Group and Malaysian government. That was in 1982. Parallelly, when I was working, many people used to come with some problems in metallurgy or some quality issues. I used to share my thoughts. So like that, one of my friends from Davangere, he was running a gear shop. He used to have a lot of problem in the heat treatment. After continuous interaction, he was feeling that I should be an entrepreneur. See, that is how the idea of becoming an entrepreneur was seeded by him. Not only he just seeded an idea, he pursued me. In fact, the area where we are now established, we have established the foundry, he had come, he had seen personally, and then he had recommended and influenced my parents. As I was telling, my entire career was supported by maternal uncle. I almost treat them as my first parents. So then, during the same period, the Karnataka government had announced a scheme. They wanted to promote industries. See, they wanted 1,000 industries to come up in a month. Under that scheme, I thought I should be fitting into. Then I applied. I thought this is a right opportunity to go in. But as a person coming from a middle class family and as a working person, I had dreamt to become an entrepreneur, but I had no financial resources. Then I started looking for investors, but investors were asking, whom do you start the foundry? Who is supporting? Which major industry is supporting? I was very blank. I had an idea of how to make a casting, but there was no support. Rather, I did not think like that. But generally, no industry will give a commitment without seeing a facility or without seeing the capability of a person, that too for a first generation entrepreneur. So, but I continuously talked to many people, and one of the person agreed to invest. He had a transport business. He said, I am ready to invest with you because I know your total development from childhood. I have a confidence I can support you. But the problem here is, we are going to, I told them, because I had come from Australia having established, Malaysia having established a SGRN foundry, there was a period when there was a changing over from a conventional to CNC era, and SGRN was not being produced in many industries, the only bigger industries for manufacturing SGRN. So at that time, I thought SGRN would be a right material to pick up. So I proposed to establish an SGRN foundry. But the people are not believing that SGRN can be manufactured in a SSI, in a small scale industry, because it is a material which is a replacement for a forging. So obviously it is a risk factor. How to depend on a quality of a casting produced in a small scale industry. So these were the issues which rather discouraged me, but at every stage when I was discouraged, I took it as a challenge. I went forward. Then one of my friends who was working in Mysore Kirloskar, he joined me. He showed interest that I have no investment, but I can support you for technical things. Then, as I was telling my foster parents, Mr. D.G. Shanthala and his wife, in fact, I named this company as Shanthala's Procast. The reason is, when everybody discouraged, a lady who doesn't know anything about foundry, who had brought me up from childhood, she said, I am confident that you will succeed. You go ahead with the project. Whatever little money I have, I will give it to you. But of course, she doesn't know what is the investment, but she definitely gave, that was our seed money, maybe about 50,000 rupees at that time in 1985. So that is how our group, it is named after her. Then about the location, as I was telling, I went with my friend and we saw the place. There was about 350 acres land was identified, but there was no infrastructure. Practically nothing was there. It is just a land. There was a small mud road to enter into the industrial estate. The only point of attraction there were two major industries. One was VISL, that is Vishweshwar Iron and Steel. Another was Mysore Paper Mills. We were under the impression that we will get a good skilled labor. But later on it is proved, it is a steel rolling mill and those people are not going to fit into this. And Shimoga, that way, in Karnataka, Belgaum is the capital for foundries. In Shimoga, there were only two foundries. One was manufacturing cylinder liner, that is, they were doing almost for a captive application. And another was a foundry which was an ancillary to VISL to meet their maintenance requirements. Whenever there is a breakdown, they used to get some requirement for castings. Such things, for that they had an ancillary. So except these two, there was nothing, no foundry culture at all. But today, I can proudly say there are 35 foundries. And the location, it is 280 kilometers northwest of Bangalore and very near to Jog Falls, a famous waterfalls. And from Goa, it is about 360 kilometers. It is called Malnad area, where almost like weather is like a Belgaum and surrounded by thick forest. And there is a lot of cultural activity. People are very cultured, and we have 2 engineering colleges, about 5 diploma colleges and 1 medical college, and about 40 to 50 degree colleges. It is a center for education. Then after all the initial preparation, I went through a major setback from a financial institution. First, we were, as a technocrat, yesterday somebody was telling, yesterday Mr. Gumaste was mentioning, that we should all become not only foundrymen, we should also become good administrators and managers. When I came out of an industry, that was in manufacturing, hardcore manufacturing, I was not knowing even what a delivery challan contains, how to prepare an invoice. And we had very limited resources to employ people. So everything as an entrepreneur, when I am sitting in the office, I am an office accounts person. When inside the foundry, I am a foundryman. And it was a very tough task, but still we managed to grow with the help of the team which we initially created. The land for which I applied, they first gave me half an acre land. I was unable to justify why I require more land. Then I went on explaining the raw material storage and things like that, but they said, no, this half an acre is enough. Somehow for continuous persuasion when we made, and according to me there were no takers, that is why finally they agreed for a 5 acres. Finally I got a 5 acres land. Then project proposal was submitted to KSFC. Karnataka State Finance Corporation at that time was a very leading financial corporation which was mainly meant for financing the projects, term loan. KSFC rejected the proposal because 1984, all of you if you remember, it was a year where there was a very bad recession in foundry. And I think most of the small industries got closed during that period. The reason for rejection was there is excess capacity in the country. Then I was still in the service, then I left the project there, but the person who was in charge of that entrepreneur development, he called me once, what is that you want to do? I explained, this is a new material which was invented which came to commercial production in 1950s. Hardly it is being done in the small scale industry and we want to be doing this, and we gave the reference of AKP and 1 or 2 people who are Bangalore Metallurgicals, there was another foundry. Then they said, no, we are not convinced. We will refer it to an organization which is an advisory body to KSFC, that is Technical Engineering Consultancy Service of Karnataka, that is TechSOC. So they referred the project to them. They took almost 1 year to complete their study. Then one day he came. It was a nightmare for me. That fellow straight away came to Mysore Kirloskar where I was working, and he called the HR person that I want to meet Mr. Rudre Gowda because we have his application with us. I was in the job, and by chance if management takes in a negative sense, then I will be out of job also. So then one of my friends, Mr. Hebbar, who was a commercial head, he came to know, then he was my good friend. Immediately he called me to his office. Then we had a discussion. Then it was a surprise for him also. So you say you have difficulty, but you want to start a foundry. That is the question. They said, I am trying to do that. Then after that, it did not stop there. KSFC did not straight away accept our proposal. Then they appointed a committee to interview the entrepreneurs. There was one well-known professor, Professor Chaudhaya, who was an advisor, who was very closely interacting, and he was guiding on technical matters. Under his chairmanship, they established a committee, they created a committee, and they called us for an interview. Called me for an interview. Then we had a 2-3 hours discussion, and one of the head of HMT Foundry was also a member of that committee. After seeing, they said, you have given a proposal for 50 lakhs. With this, the project is not viable. We suggest you to go for an oil-fired foundry, oil-fired furnace, so that your cost will come down to almost 15 lakhs. Then immediately I got up, I said, thank you, sir. I don't know whether you understand what is SJRN. I can't do SJRN in an oil-fired furnace. Then I walked out of the office. Then finally, they got convinced probably. I don't know what happened. I got a letter of intimation saying that your proposal has been accepted, but it is conditionally accepted. Because government had declared under technocrat scheme so many subsidies and soft loan and all, nothing will be given, but the money will be given. You have to bring in more your proportion of money, that is equity has to be more. Already I was in trouble, but then we had to downsize the project, and then we managed to accept their conditions. Then after this, while dispersing, they put a condition that you have to have you have to produce a power sanction letter. Many of you know that 1980 was a very bad period for Karnataka. There was one day Chief Minister declared 100% power cut. So in such a situation, the state was there and getting a HT power sanction, about 500 kVA at that time, it was not much. It was very difficult, but we pursued with the Secretary of the Government of Karnataka and he gave a sanction, but there was no substation, no power supply available. The entire cost of transport, power line has to be borne by you. With that condition he gave. With all this initial startup, with all these problems, we came to a execution stage and our foundry was ready, as I was showing in the beginning, that this was the shed which we initially built, and it was ready for this is the shed which we built in 1985. Then the task was to create a suitable manpower, because as it is generally said, if you have a good team, it is easy to manage. The team itself, at that time, the foundry knowledge, myself I had, and my friend Mr. Yogesh, he had a foundry knowledge. But we had to create a team. In this hall, Mr. Chandrasekhar, who is sitting with us, he was just then passed out from college and he had joined us. Like that we started looking at. But one thing what we adopted was, instead of employing an experienced person, it is better to try a fresher. Because changing the mindset of the experienced people is always difficult. In the beginning, when we are doing, we will have our own shortcuts or so many other ideas, but an experienced person will easily not accept those things. He wants things to be done like that only. So we adopted that concept and we started spending more time on the floor with the people, and we were successful in building a very good team, a fresh team. And another thing is, even now we find no talented people will come to a small scale sector. You can imagine about 30 years back what would have been the situation. The people whom we were getting were either not qualified or who have passed in several attempts. Only such people were available and we had to take them, and I really appreciate, they must have failed in the academics, but they were all very good. In fact, we spent a lot of time with them and now they are all our assets. They are very good, and particularly at all equipment selection time, from that stage we involved them. And initially the people were coming and they were not sure that company will sustain or survive, so they used to leave suddenly. But over a period of time, everything got set, and we started looking at the welfare of the employees and supporting them for all their health and guiding them for their getting a higher education, like joining evening colleges for diploma or ITI. Then slowly the team was very well set. Then the market as I was telling, it was a very, very tough job. In fact, to share with you, I was one of the panel member in Inter-Kirloskar Foundry Group. Many of my friends whom I approached, they said, Mr. Gowda, we have all sympathy for you, but we can't take a risk of placing order on you unless you produce something. So therefore, you can come to us after you get an order. So it is like in Kannada we say, Sattavara manayalli Saidaidavar manayalli Sasvetaradu. Where there is no death, you have to bring mustard seeds. So it is such a difficult task, whether it is how to get an order. But we started looking at a local, some of the requirements, and we somehow managed. But suddenly, one day, I got into contact with Mr. Bhargava of Eicher Tractors. Then, of course, there is all of you know Mr. N. Ramchandra. Through him, we had written several letters to many casting buyers, and Mr. Bhargava came up with the support that I have load for you, but you have to select whether you want only load or you want money also. If you are doing for a tractor, I can't assure you money. If you are doing for an export, then I can pay you in 30 days. So we accepted the challenge of 30 days doing for export market. Then we did pretty well, and that performance got us an award for best performance in 1988. So when time comes, when time starts changing, we got the same year recognition from Government of India as a best entrepreneur, because they have some certain parameters, and based on that we were also recognized. And our market strategy was take a product which other rejects or metallurgically challenging. See, generally any set foundry will prefer some definite volumes and items which can really pay them well. But we adopted a strategy. Suppose if anybody rejects, that we are going to do it. So like that, the many items came. See, one of the things which I can share with you, one day I was in HMT Precision Machinery Division, that is HMT Horological, earlier it was called. They were importing almost 200 sets of machine parts in a single stretch. And that was, you may be knowing that watch part making was done in a Peterman. That was licensed, HMT was a licensed manufacturer. They were importing the entire set, and the cost of import was so high. The cost of the castings at that time, as I understood, it was greater than 450 rupees when you convert into Indian value. I went for a load. They gave me some rods and some of the pads like things. Then I saw the castings, and I asked the materials manager, can we get an opportunity to develop these things? He just laughed it. You don't worry, you do this first. I said okay. Then we supplied. After 3 days or probably after 1 week, that man came to our foundry, because they machined all the parts. They used to have about 15-20% rejection. But these all parts got, and machine shop people said, where from you got the castings, and we want castings from this foundry. Then suddenly that materials manager got interest, and he came to our unit. There was nothing much to show, but still we explained him, this is what we want to interact with your manufacturing foundry at Switzerland, so we can save a lot of foreign exchange, why don't you take us a chance? Then he said, no, he will not share it. The moment they sent a fax, at that time the fax was, suddenly the next week, very next week, that person was here. Then he was talking to the general manager, and he was shouting at them, don't try to do this, that, and all. Then I told them, don't worry, you give a piece which is rejected. We will try to understand what type of a metallurgy it is, because the total overall deviation, or rather distortion was very, very less. Yeah, it was very less. Then we said we will do it. We did it, and it was very well accepted. They came to me after 1 year. The general manager himself came to our foundry. They came with sweets. They said, see, what for? No, whatever the castings you have made, we studied at HMT R&D, CMTI and our place, and they are perfectly matching with the imported castings, and we are placing year afterwards order on you. See, like this we went on taking up challenges, and the items like crankshafts. Then finance management was another thing which really put a lot of stress on us. We were unable to concentrate so much, but we were not able to even cope up with the local authorities, because you know the attitude of the tax officers, that the tax department or excise department is totally different at that time. Now they have, really they have changed, or probably we have grown, we don't know. Then we started delegating the responsibility, because I was doing alone, but later on I started sharing the responsibility, production activities, planning activities and finance, and this we started documenting whatever we commit mistakes there and then itself, we used to make a document and see this is what you have to follow. So this helped us in later on in getting certification, the ISO 9000 in 1996. Probably at that time in Shimoga district, we were the first to get ISO. Then the one great advantage what helped us in our entrepreneurship journey was participation in the financial, professional bodies and industrial associations. We started actively involving in IIF, and I became a chairman of Bangalore chapter. Then I was involved in Chamber of Commerce and Industry. There also we brought in a lot of awareness and started inviting the leading politicians and impressing upon them the infrastructure development and so many things, and we formed our own association and to fight for, because at that time, as I was telling, it was just a land. There was nothing was there. There now you can see it is comparable to any of the developed industrial estates. We have road, we have good communication facilities, water supply, everything is there. Then looking at our success, there are many friends. For example, Mr. Halappa, who is here, he was a vice president in Mysore Kirloskar. At the age of 55, he started approaching us. I want to start an industry. So like this, many people came. We adopted the strategy of invest and manage. You invest, we will support you, we give a hand-holding support for till you come to a break-even, then later on you go for, you manage yourself. With that concept, today we have almost 34 entrepreneurs, investors who have become entrepreneurs. Out of that, 16 are technical, 2 are financial experts, and others are financial investors. This is the way we are managing is, we have maintained transparency at all level, and we have any decision that is taken will be taken in the board of directors meeting, and all our companies, they have a QMS, and Shanthala Sprocast, which is a flagship company, is TS certified and also certified for energy and EHS. Our priorities are maintaining greenery and waste management is our priority. Conservation of energy and natural resources like sand and water being achieved through technology absorption. And this is our proposed second plant, which is waiting for past 3-4 years, because we have made everything ready. In fact, 2010, we had all clearance from Pollution Control Board, everything, but looking at the market, we have kept this thing on hold. So I also had, as I was sharing, with the permission of Mr. Ram Bhandari, so I had an attempt which was not very successful. We started a garment manufacturing unit in Bangalore, which was doing winter jackets for one very famous company, London Fog in US. But due to severe competition from Sri Lanka, and also the management failed at our end to understand their competition, then we had to close that. Another was a suspension parts, that is springs, automotive leaf springs we were doing. But that was promoted because Vishweshwar Iron and Steel and SAIL, they came with an idea of that we want to supply springs to all the road transport corporations in the country. So we are looking for a person who can do for us. That is how we established, but they backed out. We managed for 10 years, but when there was a sudden surge in the steel market, we were unable to sustain, and we closed it. So these are the two things. This is our board of management of Shanthala Sprocast. Ms. Chandrasekhar is in this hall, and the last one, Harsha, is my son, who is BE in industrial production, and he did his MBA from IIT Madras. He has joined us recently. Thank you very much for patiently listening, and I hope